O compassionate God, thanks be to thee, for thou hast awakened and made me conscious. Thou hast given me a seeing eye and favored me with a hearing ear, hast led me to thy kingdom and guided me to thy path. Thou hast shown me the right way and caused me to enter the ark of deliverance. O God, keep me steadfast and make me firm and staunch. Protect me from violent tests and preserve and shelter me in the strongly fortified fortress of thy covenant and testament. Thou art the powerful, thou art the seeing, thou art the hearing. O thou, the compassionate God, bestow upon me a heart, which, like unto a glass, may be illumined with the light of thy love, and confer upon me thoughts which may change this world into a rose garden through the outpourings of heavenly grace. Thou art the compassionate, the merciful, thou art the great beneficent God. Abdul Baha.
Thank you. So dear friends, we don't have as big a crowd as usual, but that's all right. And hopefully next week, two of our travelers will be back and we'll have at least a little bit of in the way of stories from them. So last week when we left off, let me share screen. We also get this on slideshow. All right. Can you see? Oh, okay, here we go. Here we are. All right, so last week when we left off, we were going through one of the two most important tablets to kings and rulers. And of course, these are the tablets to the Sultan of Turkey and the Shah of Iran. For obvious reasons, because he was imprisoned by both of them. They were exceptionally important to Baha'u'llah. And it's interesting that I'm sure this was done by Horace Holly, because he's the one that subdivided all of the Guardian's books on his behalf and put the subtitles in. But he cut this, in fact, I think he even cut a paragraph in half to start a new section. The section we were on last week as we finished up the evening, Baha'u'llah was giving the Sultan of Turkey general guidelines and trying to say, become a spiritual being and be a ruler. You are God's shadow on earth. You need to be first and foremost aware of your spiritual being and your connection to God. And if you rule your country this way, with that foremost in your mind, then you will gain many, many blessings. But now he's really bringing the hammer down. And this new section is, as you see, let the oppressor desist, where he's going to now start giving some very heavy warnings and also talk about his imprisonment under the Sultan. And here he is, Abdul Aziz. So, Shaheen, can you read this, please?
Let thine ear be attentive, O king, to the words we have addressed thee. Let the oppressor desist from his tyranny and cast off the perpetrators of injustice from among them that profess thy faith. By the righteousness of God, the tribulations we have sustained are such that any pen can recounteth them cannot but be overwhelmed with anguish. No one of them that truly believe and uphold the unity of God can bear the burden of their recital. So great have been our sufferings that even the eyes of our enemies have wept over us, and beyond those of every discerning person. And to all these trials have we been subjected, in spite of our action in approaching thee, and in bidding the people to enter beneath thy shadow, that thou mightest be a stronghold unto them that believe in and uphold the unity of God.
Any comments on that challenge to the Sultan of Turkey?
I like the line it says, "So great have been our sufferings that even the eyes of our enemies have wept over us."
Yes.
I remember there was a quote where Baha'u'llah said that if all the oceans in the world were made of ink and he had his pen, it would be not enough for him to write down all of the terrible things that Mirza Yahya did to him.
Well, when you think about who he is
Mhm.
and his true essence, and I mean, the worst thing the Sultan of Turkey did
Mhm.
was send Baha'u'llah to the prison in Akka, where he was put in solitary confinement. He took God's messenger for this day and put him in a place where his message could not get out to mankind. I mean, what worse thing could a king do
Right.
than isolate the messenger of God, make him a prisoner, and not allow anyone to have any intercourse with him to get that message out to mankind from God Almighty?
Right.
You know, this is why Mirza Mehdi's sacrifice is so important, because the other people there in the prison with Baha'u'llah realized this. This was the great tragedy of the prison. Not that it was physically hard to live in that space. It was that God's message was being thwarted. There was no way Baha'u'llah could get his message out when
Mm.
he's in solitary confinement in the prison there in Akka. And he says, and to all these trials have we been subjected in spite of our action in approaching thee and in bidding the people to enter beneath thy shadow. So he's actually tried to be the good citizen and encourage people to be obedient and turn to the Sultan, so that he would have the chance to be a stronghold to his people and uphold the unity of God. He gave them the opportunity to be a good king. Now he asks some very important questions. Katya, can you read this page, please?
Sure. Have I, O king, ever disobeyed thee? Have I at any time transgressed any of thy laws? Can any of thy ministers that represent thee in Iraq produce any proof that can establish my disloyalty to thee? No, by him who is the Lord of all worlds. Not for one short moment did we rebel against thee, or against any of thy ministers. Never, God willing, shall we revolt against thee, though we be exposed to trials more severe than any we suffered in the past. In the daytime and in the night season, at even and at morn, we pray to God on thy behalf, that he may graciously aid thee to be obedient unto him, and to observe his commandments, that he may shield thee from the hosts of the evil ones. Do, therefore, as it pleaseth thee, and treat us as befitteth thy station and beseemeth thy sovereignty. Be not forgetful of the law of God in whatever thou desirest to achieve, now or in the days to come. Say, praise be to God, the Lord of all worlds.
What do you think of this particular passage? Looking at the first half of it and then the second half of it. Shaheen?
He's proclaiming his innocence in the first half, and in the second, oh, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's proclaiming his innocence in the first half, and in the second half, he's giving him another chance to turn back and be obedient to the commands
Right,
of, to the commandments.
right. He's not condemning him in this second half. He's pray to God on his behalf that he will aid thee to be obedient and to observe his commandments. And he's giving the Sultan the ability to choose which path he's going to take. Do therefore as it pleaseth thee. Treat us as befitteth thy station. But don't forget God's laws. And really sort of astounding. It's not how most of us would write. Excuse me.
Of God.
Sorry. All right, let's see. Imam, can you read this, please?
Moreover, in the Kitab al-Aqdas, in this vehement apostrophe to Constantinople, O spot that are situate on the shores of the two seas, the throne of tyranny hath verily been established upon thee, and the flame of hatred hath been kindled within thy bosom. In such wise that the conquerors on high, and they who circle around the exalted thorn have wailed and lamented. We behold in thee the foolish ruling over the wise, and the darkness vaunting itself against the light. Thou art indeed filled with manifest pride. Hath thine outward splendor made thee vainglorious? By him who is the Lord of mankind, it shall soon perish, and thy daughters and thy widows and all the kindreds that dwell within thee shall lament. Thus informeth thee the all-knowing, the all-wise.
So he's saying, the guardian is reminding us that not only did he address the Sultan, he addressed the city of the capital city, Constantinople. By him who is the Lord of mankind, it shall soon perish. Well, of course, World War I would coming around in another 50 years, but even before that, they had the Crimean War and not very nice things. And then they would have the overthrowing of the Sultan with the, well, even before World War I, with the Young Turks Revolution. So a lot of evils were about to happen in Constantinople. Now, the Guardian wants us to look at the letter to the Shah of Iran. Shaheen, can you read this, please?
Sure. As to Nasruddin Shah, the Loha Sultan dispatched to him from Akka and constituting Baha'u'llah's lengthiest epistle to any single sovereign, proclaims, O King, I was but a man like others, asleep upon my couch, when lo, the breezes of the All-Glorious were wafted over me, and taught me the knowledge of all that hath been. This thing is not from me, but from one who is almighty and all-knowing. And he bade me lift up my voice between earth and heaven, and for this there befell me what hath caused the tears of every man of
Tears of every man of understanding to flow. Thank you. This is a very familiar passage. That moment where he received the revelation in the Sea of Chal that he was God's messenger for this day. Katia, can you get this one, please?
The learning current amongst men I studied not, their schools I entered not. Ask of the city wherein I dwelt, that thou mayest be well assured that I am not of them who speak falsely. This is but a leaf which the winds of the will of thy Lord, the Almighty, the All-Praise, have stirred. Can it be still when the tempestuous winds are blowing? Nay, by him who is the Lord of all names and attributes. They move it as they list. The evanescent is as nothing before him who is the ever abiding. His all-compelling summons hath reached me, and caused me to speak his praise amidst all people. I was indeed as one dead, when his behest was uttered. The hand of the will of thy Lord, the compassionate, the merciful, transformed me.
Now these two slides put together, this is that wonderful passage talking about the advent of his revelation, this mystical moment. For us, this is amazing and wonderful. But imagine if the Shah of Iran actually read this. How would he react to such a statement, do you think? Let's go back one. I was but a man like others, asleep upon my couch, when lo, the breezes of the all-glorious were wafted over me and taught me the knowledge of all that hath been. This is not from me, but from one who is almighty and all-knowing. And he bade me lift up my voice. And then for this, there befell me what has caused the tears of every man of understanding to flow. And then saying that he didn't get his knowledge from schools, and you can ask in Tehran to find out that he's speaking truthfully, but that he's doing what God bids him to do, and his all-compelling summons hath reached me and caused me to speak his praise amidst thy people. The hand of the will of thy Lord, the compassionate, the merciful, transformed me. Now, the Shah probably had all kinds of people try to contact him. And if he's like the average office at the government level, or even the higher offices at the World Center and National Center, a number of those people who contact are mentally off. If I got this in the mail, I would go, my gosh, what is this person? Of course, he also already had a reputation at court, which would have helped this. But don't you think there are people who would look at this and go, this will affect? You're not a believer.
Sorry, am I cutting out?
No, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We read a story, I think, recently at the Summer of Service that was saying that it must have been this letter that when it was presented to the Shah, that he said, if I read one word more of this, I'll become a Baha'i. And I was curious about, like, how do we know that that's what he said? And like, where did that information come from? How did we validate it? Or is it just part of the story? Like, I assume there was some kind of research that went behind it.
You know, I actually, this last week, I ended up having to deal with a family matter this week, so I didn't do it. But I was going to write to Mujan Momin to find out what we know about the letter being given to the Queen. And how do we know what her response, her alleged response was to Queen Victoria? And the same question is there for me with all these letters, because the historic record of how they were delivered and what the response was, I don't know where that comes from. And I think some of it is hearsay that's been passed on and taken on a certain status in the community. I think if it's in God Passes By, I don't think that Shoghi Effendi's facts in God Passes By are not 100% accurate. But I think that in some respects, he's heard it first. Some of these things he heard firsthand or from reliable sources. So I think if it's in God Passes By, that's probably a good source. There also is at the World Center a second volume of the Dawn Breakers, as I understand it, that deals more with Baha'u'llah's ministry, which has not been made available. And Nabil was, most of his sources were firsthand sources. He remembered and what happened. But that's an excellent question. And I don't know. I mean, just in trying to look at in preparation for this, I haven't been able to find it in English. And the easiest one, of course, for English speakers would be to see what the source material is for Queen Victoria. So I like I said, I thought I'd write to Dr. Momin and see what he said about that. And I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent question.
Kathy, is this the letter that Badi took?
Yes.
Hmm.
So Iman, can you read this next one, please?
Yes. Can anyone speak forth of his own accord that for which all men, both high and low, will protest against him? Nay, by him who taught the pen the eternal mysteries, save him whom the grace of the Almighty, the All-Powerful, hath strengthened. The pen of the Most High addressed me, saying, Fear not, relate unto his majesty the Shah that which befell thee. His heart verily is between the fingers of the Lord, the God of mercy, that happily the sun of justice and bounty may shine forth above the horizon of his heart. Thus hath the decree been irrevocably fixed by him who is the all-wise.
Any comments on this?
Understanding
Yeah.
to flow. I think it's interesting to me that what he's saying to the Shah isn't, at least in this particular paragraph, isn't even, you have to listen to me because I am the messenger of God. He's saying, is there anything that I've said that is not something unreasonable? Right, where it says both high and low will protest against him. Can anyone speak forth right on the chord? It's
He's saying to me that if I wasn't, the only way I have the courage to address you is through the fact that God is asking, as God wants me to say these things, because what I'm saying is going to make everybody mad. They're going to be angry at me. Both high and low will protest against him. So it has to be from God, because how else would he have the capacity, the ability to address truths that people from all aspects of society would attack him for doing it. And so he says, the pen of the Most High addressed me. So God told him, fear not, be courageous. And then to tell the Shah that God is in control of the Shah and is judging the Shah, that his heart is between the fingers of thy Lord. So God is holding the Shah's heart in his fingers to see if he's going to be just. And bounty may shine forth above the horizon of his heart. So God, he's telling the Shah, you are being judged by God. He holds your heart in his fingers, between his fingers. And he gave me the courage to tell you this. And this is the decree of God, irrevocably fixed by him who is the all-wise. There's no way out of this judgment, Shah. God is watching you and judging you. Shaheen, can you read this?
Sure. And by the way, I apologize. I'm reading from a small phone, so I might say some of the words wrong, but I'm trying to guess what they are as best as I can. Because
I
the
think
Zoom image kind of.
yeah. I've noticed that that's happened with other people in
Okay.
previous weeks. So one of the things I've tried to do the last few weeks is to go back over slides I made months ago to cut them in half and increase their font. But there still are going to be a couple tonight that will be small font, but this one's
Yeah.
pretty good. So,
No, that's
anyway,
fine. If I use my finger, I can move it around. The thing is, the Zoom objects, stuff like leave, mute, start. Well, not the bottom stuff, but some of the other stuff kind of get in the way of the words. So it's okay.
Yeah.
I figured a way to work around. Okay. Look upon this youth, O King, with the eyes of justice. Judge thou then with truth concerning what hath befallen him. Of a verity, God hath made thee his shadow amongst men, and the sign of his power unto all that dwell on earth. Judge thou between us and them that have wronged us without proof and without an enlightening book. They that surround thee love thee for their own sakes, whereas this youth loveth thee for thine own sake, and hath no desire except to draw thee nigh unto the seat of grace, and to turn thee toward the right hand of justice. Thy Lord beareth witness unto that which I declare.
So this particular section here, these sentences have a lot of similarities to also what he said to the Sultan. God has made thee his shadow amongst men. He said something much like that. And so Baha'u'llah is saying there's nothing in it for him except the fact that he loves the Shah and he's trying to bring him to God. He doesn't want anything else except that. He's not in it for himself. Katia, can you read this, please?
O King, wert thou to incline thine ear unto the shrill of the pen of glory, and the cooing of the dove of eternity, which, on the branches of the lote tree, beyond which there is no passing, uttereth praises to God, the maker of all names and creator of earth and heaven. Thou wouldest attain unto a station from which thou wouldest behold in the world of being not save the effulgence of the adored one, and wouldst regard thy sovereignty as the most contemptible of thy possessions, abandoning it to whosoever might desire it, and setting thy face toward the horizon, aglow with the light of his countenance. Neither wouldst thou ever be willing to bear the burden of dominion, save for the purpose of helping thy Lord, the exalted, the Most High. Then would the concourse on high bless thee. Oh, how excellent is this most sublime station! Couldst thou ascend thereunto through the power of a sovereignty recognized as derived from the name of God.
Any thoughts on this?
Seems like the mature thing to do, to abandon the dominions of earthly dominion, unless your goal is to serve God directly with it.
Right.
I think people don't really realize the gravity of leadership. If they were to truly understand the implications of everything that they do has an implication of countless lives and generations to come. It should be so overwhelming that nobody would want to do that.
Right.
But yet people crave leadership.
Right.
It's also interesting that it uses this phrase multiple times as being the shadow of God on earth, because it also implies that, yeah, like the concept that you have no power unless God gives it to you. It could all get taken from you. So you're acting on God's behalf.
Right. This image that you're very familiar with, that it occurs over and over and over again, the nightingale sitting on the tree, the branches of the tree of eternity. I mean, Baha'u'llah uses this image repeatedly to understand the station of the manifestation of God. The cooing of the dove of eternity on the branches of the lote tree beyond which there is no passing. That's a Sudarat al-Muntaha. Uttereth the praises of God, the maker of all names and creator of the heavens. When I explained this locally one time at a meeting about how what he's saying is the manifestation of God is like a bird sitting at the crossroads where this world and the next come together, and he's on a high point on a tree, and he can see both into the next world and into this world. And here he's not saying the nightingale of paradise. Here he's calling it the dove of eternity. But it's the same thing, the cooing of the dove of eternity. The lote tree, Sudarat al-Muntaha sometimes is used, beyond which there is no passing. We can't go to the next world. But the dove sees that other world. And he's uttering praises to God, the maker of all names and creator of the heavens. If you paid attention to the messenger of God, that bird sitting there on that tree, he would attain unto a station from which thou wast behold in the world of being here, nothing except God. If we just listen to the bird, Baha'u'llah, and this is why the nightingale is one of our images, one of our symbols, that wonderful Mishkan Kalam calligraphy of a nightingale. But here he's using the dove rather than a nightingale. If we became that spiritual through the knowledge we would gain from the manifestation, then being king of anything would be contemptible, because he'd want to be a servant, right? The highest station is servitude. He doesn't say that directly. So he's assuming that this is written with the probably an inner understanding that the Sultan has the capacity to understand all of the things he's writing here. But this also, to me, is a directive for all leaders, not just the Sultan and the Shah at that time, President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Putin. Neither wouldst thou ever be willing to bear the burden of dominion save for the purpose of helping thy Lord. Your motive has to be different if you're in that kind of high position.
Is this compared to the shadow of God on earth because he's like the king is showing attributes of majesty that are God's attributes, or like, the power that he has over everyone? Is that why he's called the shadow of God on earth?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. Any other thoughts on that? God hath made thee his shadow amongst men.
The reason I say that because there's a talk by Adib Tarzada. He says that God likes kingship because it shows the majesty of God. If we don't have a kingship, then we won't know what majesty means and what that looks like.
Right. My majesty is my gift to thee.
Mm.
Shaheen, you had a thought?
In Persian, saying shadow is something comforting. Like to sit under a tree, under it, beneath its shadow, for example. So these kings are supposed to, represent God's dominion, but also the protective aspect of what a king is supposed to do for his kingdom, right?
Right.
Which is to protect the people.
Well, also, God is often likened to the sun. The sun creates the shadows, but the shadows don't show the image of the sun. They show the shape of earthly things.
And they have no existence within of themselves, right? That's another
Exactly.
important thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a very deep image. And I'm sure we haven't begun to plummet it, to plummet. See, who was the last one? Shaheen, this is a short one. Can you get this?
Sure. O King of the age, the eyes of these refugees are turned towards and fixed upon the mercy of the most merciful. No doubt is there whatever that these tribulations will be followed by the outpourings of his supreme mercy, and these dire adversities be succeeded by an overflowing prosperity. We fain hope would, however, that His Majesty the Shah will himself examine these matters and bring hope to the hearts. That which we have submitted to thy majesty is indeed for thine highest good, and God verily is a sufficient witness unto me.
So who do you think are the refugees?
Was this written by the point that Baha'u'llah's family was exiled?
Right, this is when they're in the prison in Akka. So it's probably the 60 some people who were there with him as companions and other people who were sort of in that orbit. That these people are not fixated on getting out. They're fixated upon the mercy of God, and they know that these troubles that have been inflicted on them will lead to supreme mercy. But we hope, though, that the Shah himself will examine the situation and bring hope to their hearts. And they're doing all, he is submitting this, that which we have submitted to thy majesty, indeed for thine highest good. Oh, Shaheen, can you keep going with this next one?
Sure. O would that thou wouldst permit me, O Shah, to send unto thee that which would cheer the eyes and tranquilize the souls, and persuade every fair-minded person that with him is the knowledge of the book. But for the repudiation of the foolish and the connivance of the divines, I would have uttered a discourse that would have thrilled and carried away the hearts unto a realm from the murmur of whose winds can be heard, no God is there but thee, but he. Wow.
It's wonderful to speculate on what he would have said to the Shah that would have cheered the eyes, tranquilized the souls, and persuaded every fair-minded person that with him is the knowledge of the book. He would have uttered a discourse that would have thrilled and carried away the hearts into a realm from the murmur of whose winds can be heard, no God is there but thee. I mean, he's teasing us by saying, oh, there's so much more I can do, but you're keeping me from doing it, from saying it. Like those tablets he threw into the Tigris River.
What is that story?
When he was in Baghdad, he took a number of his tablets and threw them into the river, saying mankind wasn't ready for them yet. I'd like to fish them out. Though I can barely understand the ones we have. Whoops, sorry. Imam, can you get this one, please?
Okay, yeah. I have seen, O Shah, in the path of God, what I have not seen nor I heard. How numerous the tribulations which have reigned, and how will soon reign upon me. I advance with my face set towards him who is the Almighty, the All Bounteous, whilst behind me glideth the serpent, Mine eye hath rained down tears until my bed is drenched. I sorrow not for myself, however, by God. Mine head yearneth for the spear out of love for its Lord. I never passed the tree, but mine heart addressed it, saying, oh, would that thou were cut down in my name, and my body crucified upon thee in the path of my Lord. By God, though weariness lay me low, and hunger consume me, and the bare rock be my bed, and my fellows the beasts of the field, I will not complain, but will endure patiently, as those endued with constancy and firmness have endured patiently through the power of God, the eternal King and Creator of the nations, and will render thanks unto God under all conditions. We pray that out of his bounty, exalted be he may release through this imprisonment the necks of men from chains and fetters, and cause them to turn with sincere faces towards his face, who is the mighty, the bounteous. Ready is he to answer whatsoever he calleth upon him, and nigh is he unto such as commune with him.
Very powerful and somewhat familiar passage. Any thoughts on it?
It's full of love for humankind
Yeah,
and God. Similar to what Jesus did.
right. This image toward the beginning of Baha'u'llah walking toward God with a snake following him. Or a serpent, he says. Serpent, it could be worse than a snake. Longing to give his life as a martyr. And he's doing all of these things, hoping that it will release others from the imprisonment of spiritual degeneration. Another version of what the Shah looked like. Oh, this is earlier, Muhammad Shah. Okay, now the Guardian is reminding us that Muhammad Shah was also addressed by the Bab. So Katya, can you read this, please?
Sure. In the Dayoma Asma, the Bab, for his part, suddenly thus addresses Muhammad Shah. O King of Islam, aid thou with the truth, after having aided the book, him who is our most great remembrance. For God hath, in very truth, destined for thee, for such a circle round thee, on the day of judgment, a responsible position in his path. I swear by God, O Shah, if thou showest enmity unto him who is his remembrance, God will, on the day of resurrection, condemn thee before the kings unto hellfire. And thou shalt not, in very truth, find on that day any helper except God, the exalted. Purge thou, O Shah, the sacred land from such as have repudiated by the book, ere the day whereon the remembrance of God cometh, terribly and of a sudden, with his potent cause, by the leave of God the Most High. God verily hath prescribed to thee to submit unto him who is his remembrance, and unto his cause, and to subdue with the truth and by his leave the countries. For in this world thou hast been mercifully invested with sovereignty, and will, in the next, dwell nigh and unto the seat of holiness with the inmates of the paradise of his good pleasure. Let not thy sovereignty deceive thee, O Shah, for every soul shall taste of death, and this, in very truth, hath been written down as a decree of God.
This is a very strong statement from the Bab. Any thoughts?
I think that Bob may have part reason of why he wrote this specifically to the Shah is because he anticipated the treatment of him and his descendant on how they're going to treat Baha'u'llah.
Right. You notice he singles out Tehran and wants the Shah to purify Tehran. Ere the day whereon the remembrance of God cometh, terribly and of a sudden. And reminding him that he is not immortal and at some point is going to be judged by God after his passing. And he can either have a high station or he can be condemned unto hellfire.
It's interesting to think about when reading all of these different letters, the fact that, like, at least for me in my mind, I always think that the writing of like Baha'u'llah and the Bab, which comes from God, is so powerful that how can it not affect people? And how can it not change their heart to feel a certain way and change their actions? But it's interesting that, like, no, actually there's an element of free will involved, and that these rulers, had to make their own decisions. And it's not just like this magic that's going to have any expected result, but it's at the end of the day up to like the actions that they take on it. So it's interesting, at least for me, to think about that.
Yeah, very good point.
Me too, same here.
Yeah. Let not thy sovereignty deceive thee. Every soul shall taste of death. Imam, can you read this, please?
In his tablet to Muhammad Shah, the Bab, moreover, has revealed, I am the primal point from which have been generated all created things. And the countenance of God, whose splendor can never be obscured, the light of God, whose radiance can never fade. All the keys of heaven God hath chosen to place on my right hand, and all the keys of hell on my left. I am one of the sustaining pillars of the primal word of God. Whosoever hath recognized me hath known all that is true and right, and hath attained all that is good and seemly. The substance wherewith God hath created me is not the clay out of which others have been formed. He hath confirmed upon me that which the worldly wise can never comprehend, nor the faithful discover.
Magnificent summary from the Bab himself of his own station.
Wow, yeah.
Very bold.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much. On my right hand, all the keys of heaven, and on the left, all the hell. Sustaining pillar of the primal word of God. Wow.
And this one sentence here is really something for all of us to think about with the regard to the manifestations, that the substance wherewith God hath created me is not the clay out of which others have been formed.
Mm.
He's a different kind of soul. He may look like a man, but he's not. And if you're worldly wise, you can't comprehend it. And the faithful can't figure it out either. Even if you're a believer, you can't figure out who he is. how could we possibly understand the person who controls heaven and hell, has the keys to heaven and hell? What does that even mean? Shaheen, can you see this screen well enough to read it?
Yes. By my life, but for the obligation to acknowledge the cause of him who is the testimony of God, I would not have announced this unto thee. In that same year, year 60, I dispatched, you mean 1260, I think, right? I dispatched a messenger and a book unto thee, that thou mightest act towards the cause of him who is the testimony of God, as befitteth the station of thy sovereignty. I swear by the truth of God, were he who hath been willing to treat me in such a manner to know who it is whom he hath so treated, he verily would never in his life be happy. Nay, I verily acquaint thee with the truth of the matter. It is as if he hath imprisoned all the prophets and all the men of truth and all the chosen ones. Woe betide him from whose hands floweth evil, and blessed the man from whose hands floweth good.
And how would you like to get to the next world and find out that you would imprison God's messenger and treated him terribly? Didn't even allow him a candle.
All I can say is I'm glad I'm not that guy.
And it's not like he's not being warned. And then he says, it is as if he hath imprisoned all the prophets and all the men of truth and all the chosen ones. And we know from what has been said by Abdul Baha and Chogi Effendi that if we could see with the eyes of the angels, where there is a messenger of God, the earlier messengers and the concourse on high are encircling them. You know, that wonderful story in the Deep Tahir's revelation of Baha'u'llah, of Nabil and Adib's father and one or two other people following Baha'u'llah out to Baji when he first moved there, the night he moved there. And they decided to circumambulate the mansion and the fields surrounding it at a distance. And it was muddy. And they found themselves among this huge crowd of people circumambulating the mansion at Baji. And when they went back the next day, there were no other footprints other than their own. And they were told that they had seen the Supreme Concourse circling the mansion. And if you read the Leroy Ioas biography, Shoghi Effendi said something similar. He said that he told Leroy Ioas that if you could see the shrine of the Bab with spiritual eyes, with the true eyes, you would see all of the earlier messengers of God circumambulating the shrine of the Bab. So when you're at the shrine of the Bab, you're in the presence of Moses and Jesus and Abraham and all the other messengers. And so Leroy Ioas said, well, what about Baji? And he said the same is true there, except there the Bab also circumambulates. So wherever the Bab was, he wasn't alone. I mean, he and Baha'u'llah were always in the spirit world, surrounded by all the prophets, all the men of truth and the chosen ones. Shaheen, can you get this one, please?
Sure. I swear by God, I seek no earthly goods from thee, be it as much as a mustard seed. I swear by the truth of God. Wert thou to know that which I know, thou wouldst forego the sovereignty of this world and of the next, and that thou mightst attain my good pleasure through thine obedience unto the true one. Wert thou to refuse, the Lord of the world would raise up one who will exalt his cause, and the command of God will verily be carried into effect.
So what do you think of that?
Well, no one can withstand the will of God or thwart his purpose.
Right. By the way, of course, Jesus also uses the analogy of the mustard seed to be something really small. Most of us tend to think of mustard seeds as, these little seeds that are ground up to make mustard. But in the Middle East, wild mustard grows all over the place. And the mustard seeds of wild mustard are so tiny, they're smaller than the head of a pin. The tiny, not the head of the pin, but the point of a pin, They're very tiny.
Isn't that same an analogy, though, that same mustard seed can grow to be one of the biggest trees?
They're more of a shrub in Israel, but
Oh.
they're huge. Yeah, they get to be quite big, and they're very pretty. They're yellow in the spring. If we can get through one more of these sections. Now Shoghi Effendi is going to give us some commentary. Iman, can you read this, please? This is now back to the beloved guardian.
Dear friends, how vast a panorama these gem-like, these soul-searching, divinely uttered pronouncements outspread before our eyes. What memories they invoke. How sublime the principles they inculcate. What hopes they engender. What apprehensions they excite. And yet how fragmentary must these above quoted words, suited as they are to the immediate purpose of my theme, appear when compared with the torrential majesty which only the reading of the full text can disclose. He who was God's, is it vicar?
Vicar.
Vicar on earth, addressing at the most critical moment when his revelation was attaining its zenith, those who concentrated in their persons the splendor, the sovereignty, and the strength of earthly dominion, could certainly not subtract one jot or tittle from the weight and force which the presentation of so historic a message demanded. Neither the perils which were fast closing in upon him, nor the formidable power with which the doctrine of absolute sovereignty invested at that time the emperors of the West and the potentates of the East
Yeah.
could restrain the exile and prisoner of Adrianople from communicating the full blast of his message to his twin imperial persecutors as well as to the rest of their fellow sovereigns.
So vicar normally is a word used to describe British clergymen, and it's sort of the God's pastor on earth, the one who is the spiritual guide, but also sort of runs the spiritual aspect of a community, is the vicar. You tend to hear about it if you watch BBC productions and they talk about the local vicar. That's the local clergyman, British clergyman. Any thoughts? He's talking about how really pretty amazing it is. This little prisoner with no money, no power and prestige should so forthrightly, with such majesty, and as though he's the king addressing his subjects, right to these people who claimed absolute sovereignty at the time. Katia, huh? Go ahead.
What I had a comment. Growing up a Baha'i, I've sort of just like accepted that. Yeah, I mean, this makes sense. It's the manifestation of God. He has the ultimate sovereignty. But I appreciate how the Guardian is putting it in a perspective of someone who can not be familiar with the faith, so that when they investigate for themselves, to say, like, look at it. Even if you just look at it from the point of view of historical facts, there's a person all by himself, a prisoner, is proclaiming to the kings and rulers of the world his station, and that he will overcome all of them one by one. And he did, and it's true. And it's like, that's a proof right there.
Right, right. One other point the Guardian is making, he says, he's only given us excerpts from these texts. And he says he wants you to remember how fragmentary must these above quoted words, which he's just giving us for his theme, appear when compared with the torrential majesty which only the reading of the full text can disclose. So as powerful as these passages were, they can't even compare with the torrential majesty of these texts, if we could see the originals. So Katia, can you read this, please?
The magnitude and diversity of the theme, the cogency of the argument, the sublimity and audacity of the language arrest our attention and astound our minds. Emperors, kings, and princes, chancellors and ministers, the Pope himself, priests, monks, and philosophers, the exponents of learning, parliamentarians, and deputies, the rich ones of the earth, the followers of all religions, and the people of Baha, all are brought within the purview of the author of these messages and receive, each according to their merits, the counsels and admonitions they deserve. No less amazing is the diversity of the subjects touched upon in these tablets. The transcendent majesty and unity of an unknowable and unapproachable God is extolled, and the oneness of his messengers proclaimed and emphasized. The uniqueness, the universality, and potentialities of the Baha'i faith are stressed, and the purpose and character of the Babi revelation unfolded.
Any thoughts? Sort of a summary given to us by Shoghi Effendi of all these messages. Imam, can you get this?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, do you see this banner up here that's obscuring the first line?
No, I don't. I see the significance of Bahá'u'lláh. That's all I see.
Oh, okay, that's good. All right, good.
The significance of Baha'u'llah's sufferings and banishments is disclosed, and the tribulations rained down upon his herald and upon his namesake recognized and lamented. His own yearning for the crown of martyrdom, which they both so mysteriously won, his voice and the ineffable glories and wonders in store for his own dispensation foreshadowed. Episodes at once moving and marvelously at various stages of his ministry are recounted, and transitoriness of worldly pomp, fame, riches, and sovereignty repeatedly and categorically asserted. Appeals for the application of the highest principles in human and international relations are forcibly and insistently made, and the abandonment of discreditable practices and conventions determinantal to the happiness, the growth, the prosperity, and the unity of the human race enjoined. Kings are censored excellent.
Ecclesiastical dignitaries, that's religious,
Mhm.
the Pope,
Oh, arranged.
arraigned. That means it's like they're being brought up on trial.
Mm. Ministers and the plenipotentiaries condemned,
Right.
and the identification of his advent with the coming of the Father himself unequivocally admitted and repeatedly announced. The violent downfall of a few of these kings and emperors is prophesied. Two of them are definitely challenged. Most are warned, all are appealed to and exhorted.
Quite a summary of
Yeah.
what was in these tablets. Shaheen, can you get this, please?
Sure. In the Lohe Sultan, tablet to the Shah of Persia, Baha'u'llah declares, would that the world adorning wish of His Majesty might decree that this servant be brought face to face with the divines of the age and produce proofs and testimonies in the presence of His Majesty the Shah. This servant is ready and taketh hope in God, that such a gathering may be convened in order that the truth of the matter may be made clear and manifest before His Majesty the Shah. It is then for thee to command, and I stand ready before the throne of thy sovereignty. Decide then for me, or against me.
What a bold challenge.
And he doesn't need a lawyer. He is his own lawyer.
Right.
He represents himself.
Well, the Bob was, of course, going to go and meet with the Shah. The Shah was looking forward to it. And the prime minister stepped in and sent him off to Sharit or to Maku.
That prime minister.
Yeah.
That was Al-Qasi, right? Haji Mirza Al-Qasi?
Yes.
Yeah, that guy.
Right.
I wonder if he's related. I wonder if Andre Agassi, the tennis player, is related to him.
Good question. Of course, he's Persian, but I don't know
Yeah,
how common
Persians
is
and Armenians. Yeah,
Yeah.
Persians and Armenians. There's Armenians that live in Persia, whatnot. I think he's half Persian, actually.
Yeah.
Agassi.
No. Anyways, his father's at least Persian. Whether it's Armenian Persian or Persian, I don't know. Muslim Persian. So Imam, can you get this, please?
And moreover, in the Lohe Rais, Baha'u'llah, recalling his conversation with the Turkish officer charged with the task of enforcing his banishment to the fortress town of Akka, has written, there is a matter which, if thou findest it possible, I request thee to submit to His Majesty the Sultan, that for 10 minutes this youth be enabled to meet him, so that he may demand whatsoever he deemeth as a sufficient testimony and regardeth as proof of the veracity of him who is the truth. Should God enable him to produce it, let him then release these wrong ones and leave them to themselves. He promised, Baha'u'llah adds in that tablet, to transmit this message and to give us his reply. We received, however, no news from him. Although it becometh not him who is the truth to present himself before any person, inasmuch as all have been created to obey him, yet in the view of the condition of these little children, the large number of women so far removed from their friends and countries, we have acquiesced in this matter. In spite of this, nothing hath resulted. Umar himself is alive and accessible. Inquire from him that the truth may be made known unto you.
Umar, I think, is the Turkish officer that said he would do these things and probably conveyed the message and just didn't get a response from Istanbul.
Hmm.
So he put the same challenge to the Sultan that he gave to the Shah. Bring me and I'll debate whoever you want, and then you'll see what's true and what's not. But then this is so important. Although it becometh not him who is the truth to present himself before any person, yet in view of the condition of the children and the women, he's willing to do that for their sake, the other people who were with him in the prison in Akka. But remember how when Mullah Hussein asked all those questions of the Bab basically says the same thing. You know, it's really sort of rude to question the manifestation of God to see if they're true. If he really is, you know, you should be able to instantly do it, but God allows this to happen on occasion. So Baha'u'llah is willing to be merciful and allow himself to be interrogated. Katia, can you get this, please?
Sure. Referring to these tablets addressed to the sovereigns of the earth, and which Abdu'l-Baha has acclaimed as a miracle, Baha'u'llah has written, each one of them hath been designated by a special name. The first hath been named the rumbling, the second, the blow, the third, the inevitable, the fourth, the plain, the fifth, the catastrophe, and the others, the stunning trumpet blast, the near event, the great terror, the trumpet, the bugle, and their like, so that all the peoples of the earth may know of a certainty and may witness with the outward and inner eyes that he who is the Lord of names hath prevailed and will continue to prevail under all conditions over all men. Never since the beginning of the world hath the message been so openly proclaimed. Glorified be this power which hath shone forth and encompassed the world. This act of the causer of causes hath, when revealed, produced two results. It hath at once sharpened the swords of the infidels and unloosed the tongues of such as have turned towards him in his remembrance and praise.
Aroused the enemies and gave courage to the faithful. Any thoughts on this interesting paragraph?
I wonder on other planets that have sentient beings and manifestations sent down to them, that when the supreme manifestation comes, how many of them are treated in similar manner?
Yeah.
If there's
Most
any
likely.
exceptions to this.
Yeah, most likely.
Maybe there's one out there that isn't like that.
Right. Well, God gives,
Either that or it's always like that because God likes the drama.
right. Yep. Well, I think to me, it's wonderful that Baha'u'llah comes up with these titles, which probably are also, there's probably some humor behind these titles, even though they're also like trumpet blast, the rumbling, the stunning trumpet blast, the bugle, the great terror, the near event. I bet as he was coming up with names for each of these, that he probably was smiling. Katia, can I get you to read this too? Because I want to give Shaheen only the ones with large font.
This is the effect of the fertilizing winds, mention of which hath been made aforetime in the Loha Heikal. The whole earth is now in a state of pregnancy. The day is approaching when it will have yielded its noblest fruits. Sorry, can someone else read? There's something going on in the background and I'm getting distracted.
Actually, I can read it.
Okay,
thank you.
This is the effect of the fertilizing winds, mentioning of which hath been made aforetime in the Loha Heikal. The whole earth is now in a state of pregnancy. The day is approaching when it will have yielded its noblest fruits, when from it will have sprung forth the loftiest trees, the most enchanting blossoms, the most heavenly blessings. Immeasurably exalted is the breeze that wafteth from the garment of thy Lord, the glorified. For lo, it hath breathed its fragrance and made all things new. Well it is with them that comprehend. It is indubitably clear and evident that in these things he who is the Lord of revelation hath sought nothing for himself, though aware that they would lead to tribulations and be the cause of troubles and afflictive trials. He, solely as a token of his loving kindness and favor, and for the purpose of quickening the dead and of manifesting the cause of the Lord of all names and attributes, hath closed his eyes to his own well-being and borne that which no other person hath borne, nor born or will ever or will bear. Wow. So that includes the manifestations that are to come after him.
Yeah. Right. Well, given the weight of this revelation, we shouldn't be surprised. But we also know that this is the day that will not be followed by night, and that when the next manifestation of God comes, the house of justice will still be in existence. So hopefully, even though they will certainly be given a tough time, that it won't be as tough as what Baha'u'llah went through. Just got a text from Mateen apologizing. He just came down with COVID and he's been sleeping all day. He forgot to tune in tonight. We're almost done. Let's see. Can we get through this? Maybe not. It's midnight. Okay, let's see. Maybe we should stop, even though we're in the middle of a section. I don't normally like to do that, but maybe that would be the best thing to do, because I think we're still 15 minutes away from finishing this, if that's okay. Anyone talk?
Either way, it's fine by me.
Good. So anyone talk to Justin lately? We've missed him the last couple of weeks.
I think he has a camp that he's like a children's camp that he's helping out at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know this is a busy time of year. So
Yeah.
thank you, dear ones. It's always a pleasure to see you
Yeah.
and get your insights.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Kathy.
we'll continue what the Guardian has to say next week, and then he will start getting into what happened to all these people, and he will give us our perspective, or his perspective, on the justice of God, as how these sovereigns were treated because of the way they reacted. So that to me was very exciting when I got to that part of dispensation.
Oh, wow.
And again, remember, this is the World War II letter. World War II is in the early stages. It's not clear who's going to win at the time he's writing this. The Nazis are winning a lot. The Japanese are winning a lot.
Wow.
Or the Axis powers and the Japanese. So he wants us to understand this, where we fit into the total scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
Very important.
Thank you, Kathy. It's always a pleasure to attend this. I look forward to this every week.
Thank you, Shahina. It means a lot to me. All right, you guys have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so
Take
much.
care.